know what really makes us mad is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. I'm your co-host, Justin Hensley.
I'm your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And this is the show where we choose 1 year at random and select one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk-adjacent album from that year to discuss.
Before we do that, you ever think about how we squandered our opportunity to come up with a really good punk names for ourselves for this show that would have fit perfectly with the gimmick?
No, I've literally never thought of like coming up with punk personas for for this show.
You know, like Mike Yerg or, you know, any of the Ramones. Like, I guess we could be the Punk Lotto. I mean, you could be Justin Punk Lotto, I guess, but Dylan Dice.
The problem is we have the same last name, so it doesn't quite work.
Clearly brothers.
We're literal brothers. That's the difference between us and like. That means we have to do a T-shirt that's like Ramones style, and it's like the Hensleys in the Ramones font, and then like the presidential seal, and it just says our names, just our two names, even though there's others. Look, you know, when we recast the role of Dylan, well, we won't recast the role of Dylan, but like when he decides to leave the show, we'll have to like bring in a new Hensley to replace him. So that's when the youngest Hensley finally comes in.
It'll be Corey Hensley or Dave Hensley.
CJ Hensley.
Yeah, bring all of our friends from other podcasts on who clearly have other names.
Which Ramon was it that had like wasn't a Ramon? Wasn't it? It didn't actually go by the name Ramon.
It might have been like a touring member at the end. Richie Stern.
Yeah.
Which he was at the beginning.
Really early.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I forgot about Elvis Ramon. Oh, wow. I completely forgot about him.
For like a year.
Yeah. It looks
less than a year. Now, there was a Richie Ramon, though.
Yeah.
But Richie Stern was the original bass player.
I don't know. I feel like one of them, like maybe Richie didn't go by Richie Ramon at first or something like that. But anyway. Patreon.com/punklautopod is where you get access to all of our weekly bonus audio. For $1, you can get the hundreds of episodes of audio that we have done over the years. Over 200 pieces of audio. It's funny that we've almost done nearly as much Patreon content as the main show. I mean, I guess it's because I was doing like my new release updates, and we were also doing our regular weekly bonus audio. So it was going to catch up eventually, but. The Patreon is also where you'll get access to all of my bonus end of year content. I talked about this last week on the Patreon bonus audio, but I'm going to be doing some shorter best of lists that won't affect our main episode best of at the very end of the year, but I'll throw out some extra bonus audio on top of that too, just to give us a little bit more fun stuff like top EPs of the year or top compilations. Biggest disappointments of 2023. So that kind of stuff. So patreon.com/punklautopod. $1 gets you all of that extra bonus audio. And if you're interested, join at the $10 tier and you can select the album we devote an entire episode to. Just a one-time $10 donation and you tell us what to talk about. And we'll do it on the main show. And yeah, let's get on with the show then. So this week's episode, I was looking at our rotation of years and I was like, well, we've done the 80s recently. We've done the 2000s recently, and I didn't want to do the 70s again so soon because we've really like done a lot of 70s albums. So it's a decade that we've dug around in a lot, and it's a shorter time frame we use.
Yeah, very few years to choose from, and in some of those years, very few albums to choose from. Scraping the bottom of the barrel on that one. It's like when you dip in the into the ice cream bucket and your wrist hits the edge of the sides of the bucket and you get ice cream on your arm.
It's like when you're like eating out of a big bag of Cheetos and like you're way down in the bottom of the bag and then you come out and your like knuckles are just coated in cheese dust.
Not a pleasant experience is what we're getting at. It's a sensory issue.
And the 2010s just don't perform well in audience listening. Though there are exceptions, like our AJJ episode did well, our Iron Sheik episode did really well. Like some big albums do well, but if you start digging just below the surface, that's when people are like, I don't care about this. It's like, oh. Okay. I guess we won't do that one as frequently. So I was like, all right, let's go to Old Faithful, the 90s. And I was looking through all of our 90s years that we've done recently. And I was like, well, the one we've done, how do you word that grammatically? The one we've done the longest ago, I guess is how I would word that.
Sounds like a line of dialogue in The Witch.
The
Fine
year
episode we have that done longest ago.
The year we haven't repeated in the longest. God, I don't know how you word that. Grammar. Oh man,
You get the idea.
You know what I mean.
It's the year we've done least recently.
Can you tell we were homeschooled?
That feels sufficient.
I realized too when I was in
gonna
college.
play this for our mom, and we're gonna get in trouble.
I do remember being in college and like writing papers, and then like having like the teacher like write something on it and be like, "Can you reword this?" Like just like the way I worded it was really weird, and when I read it back to myself, I'm like, that is weird. I still write notes like that for the podcast. I'm like, why did I write it that way? I could chop like 5 words out of this sentence and it would be way more clear. But so the year we haven't done in the longest time, when you ever have a dream, yeah,
when the world is a beautiful place and you no longer and when you want to die.
We're talking about 1991.
Is it too late to do? Okay, here's an idea. Is it too late to do a "World is a Beautiful Place and I'm no longer afraid to die" shirt parody with the cat with all the words on the font, where you put the kid saying, "Have you ever had a dream when you?" It feels too niche.
Because I don't know that shirt is like even like a thing that anybody remembers anymore. Like
I don't
that
think
band
the World
is like
cat shirt is. They're playing with the ocean.
Yeah, they're like. One of the members is like a big time producer now too. Like, yeah, they're not. I don't know that they're still putting those cat shirts out anymore. The World's a Beautiful Place and a meow, 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 meow. Really good. I love that. I bought the Square of Opposition parody shirt that they did because it was just like, I think it just says like Square of Opposition, meow, 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 meow.
They did a cat COVID tee. The world is a beautiful, beautiful cat, and please stay 6 feet away from me. So they still have those in stock.
Okay.
that didn't sell well.
Wasn't a hot seller.
I don't think you can get the classic "World is a Beautiful Place" cat shirt anymore, though. I don't think they kept that in print.
All right, well, let's get into it. So the year we chose, 1991. The last time we covered it was like April 2022. So like we haven't even touched it in over a year. Mainly because 1991 is bad.
Yeah. I was going to pull up the charts before we started recording. I was like, what year is it? And you were like 91. And I don't know if it was just like a sigh or a hiss through the teeth. Like, 91. Not great.
Yeah, like, I mean, there's stuff, but 91 is Nirvana's Nevermind and
the Slender Man record by Slint.
Slenderland.
Slenderland.
Slow Dive, not a punk album. Steady Dive, Nothing by Fugazi. We're in shoegaze territory. Lots of shoegaze still going on. We're in indie rock land. No Pocky for Kitty by Superchunk was released this year. We're like, I guess we're in grunge. Like grunge is happening, but it's pretty big. Like it's pretty big stuff. Yeah. Not that punk outside of Nirvana.
Yeah.
But I actually did.
It is mainstream rock at this point.
Yeah. Which whenever like rock becomes so mainstream, it eats away at like punk. It's like bass. I don't know what that is. It happened in like the later 90s when like nu metal was really big, like it ate away at punk's popularity, when like metalcore was big in the 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you had all the pop emo stuff in the 2000s. So like anytime like rock is like a big sound, punk is kind of like on a downturn. So 91 we're like, oh yeah, big time grunge rock happening here. And so now all the punks are like, all right, what are we doing now? What is our thing now? Like, what direction do we go in? And I had a few selections. I was going through the list trying to figure out what I wanted to talk about. And there were a couple things that I was like, I could do this, I could do that. My initial gut reaction was, we should do the self-titled Drive Like Jehu record. We've not done a Jehu album. There's 2 Jehu records anyway, so it's not like there's that many to choose from. And I genuinely would have picked it if this record was on Spotify, which it's not. It's not even on Bandcamp either. Like, so this would have had to be like another YouTube core, just watch the YouTube video version of it to listen to the album. And we just did that for last week's episode, so I was like, let's try something else. Though weirdly, Yank Crime is available on Spotify still. I thought about pulling the trigger on Jawbox and their album Grip, which came out in 91. I listened to a little bit of it. It's a good record, but it's not my like favorite out of the Jawbox catalog. I don't know how much I would have found to really like say about it. It's a fairly like straightforward record too. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, there's a chance that I would have got something good out of that record, but I don't know.
I was trying to find. I did a blog post on that record on our old blog whenever they did, like Discord did like a vinyl reissue of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they had emailed me because I was getting pitched by Discord pretty regularly for a little while there.
I don't want to brag, but E. Mackay was sending you emails directly.
I don't remember the dude's name who was doing the PR for them, but it seemed like it was somebody in-house. I don't know that it was like a PR firm. It was just like a guy who worked for the label, I think. But
so like, yeah, there's still the Discord house, but like across the street is like another house where they actually kind of like handle all the like packaging and mailing of everything. So yeah, I mean, it's very, very likely that it was somebody who like, I imagine Discord has like someone in their crew that assembles packaging that also does PR for them, which like, this is a little old by the time this episode comes out, but there's that Minor Threat Outtakes EP that just came out, and they still are like packing and delivering those things by hand at the house across the street. And it's definitely like, I think they said, please be patient with us. We had a lot of orders for this thing. So it's cool. It's very cool that Discord essentially still operates the same way it did in the beginning. So you gotta love a DIY ethos like that never got above their head, and they never suffered those like money problems that the like so many contemporary labels went through.
I found the guy in my email. It was Aaron at Discord.
Nice.
I wonder if he still works there. Yeah, he sent me a couple of things. Like they did that Jawbox.
Mm-hmm.
I reviewed that Alarms and Controls record. He sent the SOA demo. I want to say he did the red hair thing too.
Yeah.
That was fun getting Discord emails.
I still get PR emails now.
Yeah.
Nobody like as high profile as Discord sending me stuff though. It's always like PR people you've never heard of promoting bands you've never heard of, and you're just like, cool. But
not what our show does.
Yeah, right. I mean, the new release update kind of is, but yeah. It
send them to me and I'll do pass fail. It's gonna be a lot of fail.
Yeah, I'll just forward all those to you. Those PR emails I get you're just like, how did you get my email? I did not sign up for this. And then they'll even get weird and passive and be like, if you don't want to be receiving these emails, just tell us. It's like, well, I didn't ask for them in the first place. So you just started sending them.
Yeah.
Like the guy from Cold who wrote a book, and then weren't we getting emails about that? But moving on, I really did consider Big Drill Car's album Batch. That's their second album. I listened to it. I enjoyed it. It just didn't like set me on fire. It didn't like inspire a lot of thoughts in my head where I was like, oh yeah, I could talk about this, I could talk about that. Like it's a really solid record. It's a good record, good kind of like skate punk record from the early 90s. I definitely like the album before, the first record they put out, a lot more. So if I was going to do a Big Drill Car, I would probably want to do the very first record by them. And then there were two that I was like, we've covered these bands in the past. I'd love to do them again because they were actually a pretty long time ago that we talked about them. But also they're pretty close to the records that like we talked about. So I don't know how different the discussion would have been. So I was very strongly considering Soar by Sam I Am. And we covered Billy way back in like the first 10 episodes, I think, of the show where we did Billy. So we're due for a rerun of Sam I Am. But Billy is the record that came out after Soar.
Yeah. And Billy's not like amazing.
Right. Like it's good. It's good. I think it's better than Soar, and I think it's better than the self-titled. But if I want to do Sam I Am again, I want to do one of the three like later records, like Astray or Clumsy or whatever. You Were Freaking Me Out. That one.
Yeah.
You Were Freaking Me Out would be a cool one to do because that was like, some people consider that like their favorite. Like that's like the best Sam I Am record. And I've never felt that way. So I would like to kind of like dig on that record and see what it is about that album specifically. It was also like a major, I think, too. And it's kind of hard to get at streaming, I think. It like comes and goes on streaming. So I would maybe want to do something a little later. Soar's good. It's long. It's like really long. It's got like 50 something minute long album. And it's just like, it's good, but not my favorite from this period. And the other one I was strongly considering was Seaweed and their album Despised. And that's their first like full length album. They had some EPs prior to this. And we've covered 4 before on the show. And I think Despised is a little bit more rough around the edges. It's a solid record, but I think they get better with the next album, and then they get better with 4, and then better with Spanaway. Like we talked about doing their final record. Dylan, you'd considered choosing that for us to talk about once, and would have been fun to do that one too. So I don't know. Seaweed is back on the table for some optional discussion because I want to talk about Seaweed again soon. But if it was up to you, what album would you have selected for us to talk about?
Oh man, what would I pick from 91? A lot of 91 is because there's like that Integrity, which is not the one we did, right? Because we did Those Who Fear Tomorrow. We did do Those Who Fear Tomorrow.
Yeah, it came out in 91.
Humanity is the Devil, but that's the EP. There's not much I would pick. Honestly, 91 is just I feel like we've hit a lot of the stuff that I would want to talk about. Like Funeral at the Movies by Shudder to Think. I think that could be an interesting record to talk about. That's a band that we've talked about before that could be interesting to talk about again. We could get, I feel like the stuff that I'm more interested in from 91 is much more in the punk adjacent category. So like there's a Swerve Driver record that would be really good to talk about. We generally only ever do shoegaze in February. So Curse of the Mekons by the Mekons would be one I would be interested in talking about. Probably mostly just to like have a reason to like actually investigate the entire Mekons career because it's long and strange and seem like a band that exists outside of really all scenes.
You should do your own challengeography and do the Mekons.
That could be a weird one.
You could do your TikTok series on it.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I have thought about starting that series. Got to work out the details, how I'm going to do it.
I've really enjoyed doing the Pinback challengeography. I am actually poised to record another one. I just haven't had the chance to actually sit down and record it on top of like our other bonus audio that we do. But yeah, I definitely want to do. I like it. It's a fun run through stuff. So I definitely think you should do something, even if it's just writing it. We could post it as a blog on the hey, we got the Substack, that had like 14 new signups this year, and I don't think we posted anything once in the year.
I have not posted anything.
So 14 signups for no new content's pretty good.
Yeah, I should probably do that instead of scrolling through my phone all the time.
Well, let's get into the actual record I did select. So We pulled 1991, and I selected Strong Reaction by Pegboy. They are from Chicago, Illinois. They founded in the year 1990. This album was released September 15th, 1991 on Quarter Stick Records. And this is the band's debut full-length album. The personnel on this record is Larry Damore on vocals and guitar, Joe Haggerty on drums, John Haggerty on guitar, and Steve Sailors on bass and backing vocals. And the album was produced by Ian Burgess. And yeah, we'll get more into details on some of that stuff later. So, do you remember, what is your history with Pegboy, knowledge, experience, like anything like that? Because honestly, when I was thinking, I had a hard time figuring that part out.
It's related to Fest.
Yeah.
The time period that I would have listened to Pegboy originally, I want to say is like 2015-ish. Pegboy would have been a band that we would have gotten into through being name dropped as an influence on stuff like Off With Their Heads and a lot of the Fest punk stuff. That's where I recall being introduced to Pegboy. Yeah, 2015. I was exactly right. Look at that.
Wow.
June of 2015 would have been the first time I listened to Strong Reaction by Pegboy. Did they play Fest that year?
So they definitely played a fest. I tried to find footage from it, but I could not find like any video of it. That was really weird. I know they for a fact played at 8 seconds, which means it sounded like shit. You could barely see anything. I remember that. I remember being in the back, not being able to see much, and just being like, I guess I'll just listen. Oh, it sounds awful. Because this metal room sounds like shit. Just the worst sounding venue I think of. Worst sounding professional venue I've ever been to. It's horrendous audio in that place.
Fest 16 was when Pegboy played, I want to say. I don't think they've played any other times.
So that would have been in 2017 then.
2017.
Which was the Superchunk year.
Yeah. So seeing Pegboy at Fest 2 years after listening to them for the first time. So yeah, Pegboy was really just like this is a reference band. This is an important band. This is an influential band. I guess I'll go listen to them. And it didn't really they didn't really become like a staple listen. It was just kind of like, I enjoyed that. That was cool. And I can definitely see the influence and may come back to this from time to time, but it didn't become like a regular listen for me at all. They've always been, to me, they have always been an influence band. Never a band that I actually really listened to.
So mine goes back just a little further, but it is still very tied to being an influence. So I want to say the first Pegboy song that I ever heard was Field of Darkness. And Off With Their Heads covered it for a split 7-inch that they did with a band called No Friends. And on the No Friends side of the split, they covered a Dag Nasty song. So it was just like this 2-song single, split single, each doing a cover on each side. And that was the first time I'd ever heard Field of Darkness. But I also don't think at that time I realized that was a cover, or maybe who it was a cover of. because I do have the distinct feeling of the first time I listened to the Pegboy version of Field of Darkness, I was like, I know this song. What is this song? Like, I was trying to place it in my mind. Like, I was trying to find, where do I know this song from? And it took me a minute before I realized, like, oh, Off With Their Heads did this song. Oh, this makes so much more sense. What Off With Their Heads' whole deal is now. Like, Off With Their Heads are a Minneapolis band, but like they have a very Chicago basis for their sound. Like, they're equally as inspired by Pegboy, at least Ryan Young. Right? We know for a fact Ryan Young is a huge Sam I Am fan. He's a huge Pegboy fan, and he's a huge Dillinger 4 fan. So like that's kind of like the big things that all inspire him. And which I think Ryan lives in Chicago now. He's a Chicago transplant. But yeah, like hearing that Pegboy song and being like, oh, so that's kind of like where his voice comes from. That's where Ryan's like vocal style and technique comes from. It's just this real gritty, gravelly kind of like yelly, but also like with a sense of melody. So I definitely know that first time I heard that, I was like, oh, wow, okay. I know this song. And then it took me a minute to place where it came from. And then after that, I dug through the rest of their discography and was like, oh, this is good. That split 7-inch came out in 2010. So I probably heard it in 2010, 2011 when I heard that Off With Their Heads song. And then maybe another 2 or 3 years before I heard the actual Pegboy version. I most likely just downloaded Pegboy off of one of those punk blogs that have been lost to the sands of time of the internet. One of those blog spots. Like, I can kind of even picture how it looks, but I cannot remember the name of that blog for the life of me. But it definitely, I think, was the version that had the LP and the 3-chord Monty EP as part of it, because that was the CD version of the album when it was released. The LP version is just the album. But yeah, that was kind of my introduction to Pegboy. Started digging through them and then like really enjoyed them. And they've definitely been like one of my favorites of this scene specifically. Chicago has a really cool and unique scene. So you know what though? I may have even learned about it from one of those Barnes and Noble listening stations too. Now that I think about it, because I was always just like following like similar artists on that thing and just like picking things throughout. And so maybe Pegboy I heard them there first. Either that or a blog. Maybe the blog was the first place I heard a whole record, but those listening stations showed me a lot of stuff. So a little background on the band. The whole group is essentially a supergroup spun out of a couple different groups. Yeah, okay. So John Haggerty and Joe Haggerty, they're kind of the basis of this band. The guitar and drums, they're brothers. And John Haggerty was in Naked Ray Gun. During what era was he in Naked Ray Gun? He was in Naked Ray Gun from 83 to 89, which is like the classic peak period of Naked Ray Gun. That means he's on Throb Throb all the way through Understand. So yeah, the classic era. And his brother, Joe, was in the band The Effigies, another kind of Chicago legendary group. Larry DeMoore and Steve Sailors were from the Chicago hardcore band Bhopal Stiffs. Bhopal Stiffs. Bhopal? I don't know how you pronounce that, but they were one of these like 80s hardcore bands that, you know, Chicago hardcore is not necessarily like the most famous thing. I guess Naked Ray Gun is considered like hardcore, I guess, but yeah, not too familiar with the Bhopal Stiffs. But so John leaves Naked Ray Gun in 89. He forms Pegboy with all these, you know, people that he's worked with, because the Bhopal Stiffs put out a EP, it was a demo. John Haggerty produced Bhopal Stiffs demo in 87. So it's just like, we're all from Chicago. We all know each other. We all hang out. We're cool. Let's start a new band together. And it kind of picks up where Naked Ray Gun leaves off, because Naked Ray Gun's last record is in 1990 before they go on their hiatus, breakup stuff. So it's a spiritual successor to Naked Ray Gun.
Yeah, it is kind of a connecting tissue between Naked Ray Gun, your late 80s Chicago scene, and the Minneapolis scenes, and the broader category of Midwest punk. Because you have your 90s Chicago stuff as well. That all in a way are, you know, indebted to Naked Ray Gun, indebted to Pegboy. Yeah, Pegboy is the Olympic torch, I guess, the eternal flame the in-between years of kind of that scene, because there's not, as we look at this chart, like we looked at the chart for 91, and it's like there's not a lot of other stuff, not big stuff in terms of Midwest punk, at least not in 91. Maybe there's something huge in 92, or like when does I mean, we don't get like Lawrence Arms until 99, so
yeah.
Try to think of the predecessors to them.
Slapstick and
Slapstick, yeah. The Slapstick family tree is Broadway's. Broadway's I don't know too well. I guess they're 96. Okay. Yeah.
Which makes sense because the last Pegboy record's 97. So you're right. I think you're right on the money as far as, yeah, Pegboy is the middle ground between Naked Ray Gun and Lawrence Arms, essentially. Broadway's are there before Lawrence Arms, and that whole wave of punk in Chicago.
Yeah. Dillinger 4 start in 94. So what's, your Minneapolis scene is not super active in the time that Pegboy is a band either. So,
I mean, I guess Screeching Weasel too. They were big band in the 90s. So they're part of the same.
It's such a different sound, though.
Yeah, very different. That kind of like plays into the sound is I was looking at the producer Ian Burgess. So he was an English music producer who was living in the States at the time. He was living in Chicago, I believe, and he produced records by Naked Ray Gun, The Effigies, Big Black, and Ministry, all Chicago bands, all really big Chicago bands, and was really responsible for helping shape the overall sound of Chicago's punk scene. And while Big Black and Ministry are playing different style of music, if you really just like kind of boil down just the qualities of like a Naked Ray Gun and a Effigies and Pegboy sound, there's a harshness to the Chicago sound. There's a little bit more. It's a weird mix of tones, because it's like, especially with Naked Ray Gun and Pegboy, it's like it's gruff. It's rough around the edges. It's got like tonally, just like the guitar work is very just loud and buzzy, but there's like a sense of very strong melody in all of these bands. Like Naked Ray Gun absolutely is just like catchy as hell. And D'Amour's not necessarily as good of a singer as Jeff from Naked Ray Gun, but he has that like, well, yeah, you got to sing it. We're not doing the hardcore yelling. Like, we're not just yelling our songs the whole time. You have to like try and actually like sing something, and his voice is like sandpaper, but he's still trying to achieve some melody. And then some of those like harsher sounds, like you get that in your Big Black and your Ministry. So there is just like this like rough around the edges kind of, you got the harsh cold winters of the Midwest and Chicago and the wind in the Windy City. Like, I've never been to Chicago, but I've heard that wind is awful in the winter.
Yeah, and there's the Husker Du effect also.
True. They're close enough to Minneapolis, so you're getting that Husker Du influence on your sound. And they're doing the same thing. It's like the harsh winters there, and yeah, there's just like this sense of melody that's going on too underneath. Because I've also heard, I've never been to Chicago, their summers are awesome from what I've heard. They're like a very small window of like awesome weather in their summer, but it's supposed to be pretty cool pretty nice in their summer. So like, and people are like, oh yeah, they all take advantage of like being outside during that time period. So makes sense. And that maybe that's where that little bit of sunshine comes through on the music, like the singing and that's our summer. That's our 2 months of warm weather.
Yeah. I know nowadays regionality is kind of dead in terms of the, bands from certain regions having similar sounds. And I think in terms of punk, like the biggest cause of regionality is like producers. Like you have your Discord scene is everybody recording with Don Z. They all sound like they were recorded by Don Z. And they certainly were playing music that appealed to the scenes, but you always had pretty significant outliers in terms of sounds. And you could certainly find outliers in Chicago as well, but there is such an overwhelming, like if I were to give an example of a regional punk sound constrained to a certain span of years, Chicago would probably be the one. Like that to me is the most regional sounding sound. Everything that I'm aware of that I can think of from Chicago just has an edge to it that is very, very abrasive. Like there's, even if they're a pop melodically focused band, like your shellac to I'm trying to think of the poppiest of the pop, like even like your Lawrence Arms, like you're not your later 90s stuff, there is just a hard edge to it. So like I wouldn't think that the actual environment would impact that, but I do think there's something to that.
Yeah. I don't know. I think you're right. The regionality of things is probably a little bit more diluted than it used to be, but there is like personality traits that different regions of the country have. There's the Minnesota nice, like Midwestern is known for like being pleasant to each other. Southern hospitality is a thing, was a thing. New Yorkers just being mean and angry all the time, Yeah, it's all stereotypes, of course, but like, I don't know. Have you ever, well, you know this because you've moved from the South. Like when culture shock by like living in a different place, like you've definitely had to have experienced that in some ways,
Yeah, especially when you move to places with lots of transplants.
Yeah.
And then you can distinguish between like who's from what regions.
Yeah.
Like Phoenix is like there's a lot of Midwestern influence, but then you've got your people that grew up in New Mexico and Nevada and Arizona. Yeah, there's certainly your quintessential Californian stereotypes that do exist.
Like even when me and my wife went to Salem for our anniversary a couple years ago, like it's right, it's right up against Boston. And the thing that I was like, we were in a restaurant and I was just like, it's so loud in here. Like, and I noticed that in every single restaurant I went to, like everybody is just like talking much louder and faster up there. And so I was like, oh, that's a thing. Like, that's a real thing. I thought that was like a joke that like hacky stand-up comedians did. But no, like it's like a true thing. Like people would just talk faster and are louder and they walk faster up here. And they seem mean, but they're not actually mean. It's just the way they're talking. It's the accents, Yeah. So yeah, regionality is like a thing. So it kind of makes sense why, like, especially during this era when there was less internet around, nothing like that, how you would create this like local scene sounding thing. But yeah, so this was their follow-up to their 3-Chord Monty EP, which was the very first release on Quarterstick Records. Quarterstick was an imprint, or is, I think, too, an imprint of Touch and Go Records. And like I said, the very first Quarterstick release. So definitely like something that they were trying to build around. And I was curious what else was coming out on Quarterstick in 91. And the only other thing that came out that year on Quarterstick in 91 was the post Mission of Burma band Volcano Suns. I listened to a little bit of it. I got maybe like 4 tracks into that record and I was like, oh, this is Mission of Burma people. Like it was very obviously like the same genre of music as Mission of Burma. Never listened to Volcano Suns before, but like I was like, oh, is all of the post Mission of Burma stuff like this? Because I think I got a way more like Mission of Burma to listen to now when I think of it, just think of it as an extension of that sound. So I thought that was very interesting. And I think Mission of Burma was also an influence on Pegboy. But so, yeah, it's their first record. Did you know this record prior to listening to it for the show?
Yeah, I've listened to it before and heard songs from it in intervening years. But like I said, Pegboy was never a band that I really spent a substantial amount of time on. They never really clicked in a way that made me want to come back to them a lot. But it was really interesting listening to this record for this episode and going, I know this a lot better than I thought I did.
Yeah.
Maybe it's that influence is that strong that there's a bit of predictability to this record. When I hear it, I'm like, okay, I've heard what other bands have done with these chords and rhythms and melodies, and that I know where this song is going to go, despite not knowing it's really that well from having actually listened to it. But it, like, most of the record, I'm just like, it's a record I can get my bearings on every song pretty much immediately and just predict where it's going to go, and, you know, really know the chorus by the second time it comes around pretty easily. I think that's mostly the influence in terms of, like I said, with what bands have done with Pegboy as an influence and as like kind of a blueprint. People have done pretty direct homages to Pegboy, I think, in their songwriting, and Naked Ray Gun. And I know Naked Ray Gun pretty well, very well, I would say, compared to Pegboy. So there's that overlap and that similarity as well. But beyond that, I do think there is something about Pegboy specifically that is really good and really compelling and makes you want to emulate it. And I think that's why they're so influential. I don't think it's just that they were one of the few or one of the only, possibly even only the only band of this ilk for at least a year or two that gives them longevity in terms of being our reference point. It is just genuinely really good. That it's something that I'm like, why didn't this click more when I heard it the first time? Why didn't I come back to this more? Because I hear it now and I'm like, yeah, this is solid. This is really good.
Interesting, because I definitely have listened to like all the Pegboy records and I was like, this is good. This band's great. I looked at my last FM too just to see, and I had scrabbled 3 tracks from this album in 2012 and then like the whole thing in 2014. So there's a chance I listened to it probably more in 2012. I just wasn't actually like tracking it. So that may have been my introduction, which actually would place it pretty close to around the same time I would have heard the Off With Their Heads cover. So it's funny that like I kind of latched onto them and were just like, I got it immediately. I'm like, this rules. This is what's like happening now. Because it definitely feels like a really big influence on a lot of the punk music of like the 2010s, like the early 2010s, like very much an inspiration on that sound. And so, yeah, I was definitely like already a fan, like knew all the records. And so I was like, that's a good record. Let's talk about that one because it's just a really good one. That's ultimately why I went with it, because I just was like, it's a great record. This is like their biggest album as far as like the one that people know the best. And it's super influential band. So I was like, when else are we going to talk about Pegboy, you know, as for our main show? That being said, Cha 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 D'Amour and Earwig are both great records too. But I think this one's better. So it's funny that you didn't really like have that with them, and this is kind of like your like eyes wide open, you know, like oh I get it now, like reaction to listening to it. So I guess revisiting it, you know, trying to listen to it with my listening ears, I think our buddy Hugo Reyes actually said something similar on his podcast Violent Reactions, and I think he said something along the lines of like, when I'm listening to music to write about it, like I listen to it differently than when I listen to something for just pure enjoyment's sake. Like, and I forget how exactly he worded it, but like putting his listening ears on specifically to like, all right, let's focus and listen. And so I listened to this album many times in the past in like full just music enjoyment mode. And so like then trying to put on like the listening ears and just being like, okay, let's pay close attention. What's happening on this record? And everything on this record works so well for me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it's a record that I think it's a record that is well balanced, and it's a record you can passively absorb and really enjoy. And I think it's a record that you can put your listening ears on and you can dig into it and find little things to highlight that little things that are gonna slip by when you're just like kind of it's on and you're driving, or you're not paying super close attention to. Like there's definitely stuff that there's stuff that I want to hear closely, which is kind of unique and it has a similar quality to Naked Raygun, because Naked Raygun is a band that I've listened to in recent years with headphones, and it's a very different experience. You wouldn't think of Naked Raygun as like a headphones band, but when you put them on, and maybe it's just that bands that have this kind of like dense, hard edged kind of like almost metallic tone. It's like shoegaze. It's like it's like Husker Du, where you're just like you can get real into the grain. You can zoom in on the film grain. It just sounds like a good black and white photo. Like the detail.
Oh man, you gotta see it on 78 millimeters. And yeah, I guess because you get the enjoyment of the whole record as a whole when you're just like, this rocks, this is fun. There's just hooks for days all over this record. But yeah, the critical ear of hyper focusing on like what's happening, what's going on individually with each working piece of this record. You're just like, oh, that's good. It's one of those things where it's like the sum of the parts is like making this like amazing sounding record. But like when you dig down on what each piece of the band is doing, you're like, that's fucking awesome. That's so cool. Like what is going on? Yeah. So like it's cool.
You have your big picture, like it's just well composed. Like it's pleasing to hear. And then you can get close and you can get into the granular details and you can get into like the lighting and the contrast, to stick with photography terms. Like you can get into the grain and you can focus on what the bass is doing. You can focus on what the guitars are doing. You can focus on what the drums are doing. You can really take the melodies and sing them on their own.
Which I think is like, it's another Chicago thing. I mean, I think it's this Ian Burgess guy's really involvement in the Chicago scene at this time, because like take the Minneapolis sound at the same time, like Husker Du stuff. The Husker Du stuff, stand it next to the Naked Raygun stuff at the same time period. Early Naked Raygun's pretty rough around the edges, pretty hard to hear. But once I think like the production values start to come up in those Naked Raygun records, that's when you're like, it just sounds really good. And whereas Husker Du was like, whole thing is just like, yeah, we just sound like this. Like, this is just how we sound. We're going to sound very harsh, and like the production's not great. Because they also use, my guess is the Ian Burgess guy was just a really good producer. And like a lot of the Husker Du stuff, wasn't a lot of it done by like Spot at SST. And Spot was a good producer, but he was good at a very specific type of music. And I don't think he was necessarily the best producer for Husker Du. I don't think he knew how to get the cleanest tone out of them.
I don't think Spot could get a clean tone out of anybody.
Well, no, the Minutemen stuff is like crisp. All the Minutemen stuff is super crisp. So like that,
yeah,
I guess it's
they only
performers.
did. Flip Your Wig was produced by Bob and Grant. I don't know who engineered that record, but
yeah, I guess ultimately, like my point of saying all that is just like the production was really good, so like it really shined.
Still when I walk out at night, and I'm feeling like my head is
production on this record is really good. Like, it's definitely like, it's 1991. Like, you're like, yeah, it sounds like a 1991 recording. You really hear that. Like, there's still the gated drums going on, but it's not like that overboard gated drums that you had in the 80s. Like, this definitely a little bit more controlled and a little bit more fine-tuned. Ian Burgess was also apparently like a huge inspiration on Steve Albini's recording process too. Like, he learned a lot of his stuff from him. So that probably explains why the drums sound really good on here. Like, they have a big sound, but you can hear like everything. Like, I love listening to the drumming on this record, because it's like you hear these really fun fills, and like just like if you take everyone in the band, the drumming feels like the most technically like proficient or advanced out of everyone else in the group. Like, it's just like, shit, that drummer's good, which makes sense because they've been playing in bands forever. At this point, Joe was the effigies had been around since like the early 80s, so playing for a long time. So yeah, really, really great drumming I found on here. I love the bass tone on this record too. It's like gritty. It's got a lot of gain in it. My favorite kind of bass work. Just like this real, like, you can tell that a bass string is metal strings, like with the way that the bass is recorded on this record and the tone and everything on it. And the guitar work is really, it's interesting stuff. Like, I wouldn't say there's like crazy leads or solos on here. Everything is kind of understated when it comes to that. But then there's just like these really cool moments on the record, like that like chimey kind of guitar sound on like Field of Darkness, just that lead guitar on that song there, really cool sounding. Still Uneasy has some like slight leads on it that are pretty cool. Yeah, I don't listen to the record and go like, whoa, listen to those 6 solos. I just am like, man, these solos are just perfectly complementary with like the overall melody of the song and what's going on. Because and vocally, Larry's not like, how would you describe his vocals? Is he a good singer? Like, he can find a good chorus and a good hook to really drive the song.
Probably a good singer in the sense that the most important thing is the idea, or not. Yeah, maybe the idea is more important than the execution. Technically speaking, maybe not. Like, it's hard to say. I mean, because there's what qualities you're looking for. You're not looking for a classical vocalist, so it's not someone that you measure by classical pedagogy. Like, but belting isn't easy. Singing with power and volume and being on pitch is not an easy thing to do. And the pitch is there enough. It's all close enough that you get the idea, and that's what's really important. And the ideas are really good. So very effective.
Yeah. I'm trying to think vocally. Larry is very close to Frankie Stubbs, who's doing, Leatherface put out Mush the same year, which I think Mush and Strong Reaction being the same year is like very fitting and very oh yeah, this is super good. These being out at this time are going to be super important for the future, especially of like punk. But I was trying to think of like other singers who have that kind of like, I sing like this the whole song, and not in like a hardcore yelling kind of way. Like, we have your LA hardcore, DC, all our hardcore bands are doing that kind of thing. Bob's not that kind of singer in Husker Du. D Boone's not that kind of singer. Mike Watt's not like that. Like, do we have any other like Dickie Barrett? I guess the Boss Tones were doing stuff in the 80s, so I guess there's that. Like, just like a gravel voice singer. I mean, I guess Sarah Kirsch. Fuel's first record came out in 1990.
Yeah, there's definitely some similarities there. His voice is a little cleaner than most of like the gruff punk staples, but I mean, you can certainly hear a lot of the influence on Dillinger 4.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like not Patty's vocals, but
no, not Patty, but it's
Eric. No, Eric's the other one, the one who's even lower than Patty, right?
I'm trying to think of specific D4 songs. I'm trying to think of who the singer is.
It is Eric. Eric's the high singer of D4, and Eric has he's a higher voice, but it's like in the same like grit lane. You know what I mean? Like it's a higher voice, but it's just like got the same level of crispiness to it.
Yeah, it's the edges are a little fried, but there's a certain kind of it's kind of a bullfrog like hollowness and like not fullness with a little edge to it. Not a common voice in punk.
No. Yeah, I think it's I guess the vocals are the thing that kind of like makes this album stand out to me the most, but I don't think that voice would be as enjoyable if it wasn't for the type of guitars that we're playing underneath too. It's just this kind of like eternally driving guitar song. The songs it's a case of like start song now, everybody keep up. Like that's how it feels. Like there's no like weird times. There's not any like they change tempo on a couple of songs where like the intro will be slower, then they pick it up for the verses and everything. But like it's a like you better get on the train, we're leaving now. The kind of like feel to it. Like it feels like somebody could get left behind very easily, but they're all so good at it that like nobody actually does get left behind. Like they keep up with each other just perfectly.
Yeah, there's a deceptively tricky timing to it,
especially with the vocals, because he has this like lagging kind of vocal style where his takes feel like they're like, I bet like live it's inconsistent, or maybe during this time it might have been inconsistent from like show to show and like how long he like hangs out on like a phrase or a note. So it's like if Larry's off his game, which there is a funny story I'll read later about where he was very off his game. So like it's possible for Larry to be off his game, which maybe means I don't know, maybe he did a really good job in studio, or the Ian Burgess was really good at like getting him on task. Yeah, it's like a magic trick, just trying to keep it up together and making it work together so well. I mean, it helps that they're all very experienced musicians by this point. Like they've been playing forever. So that helps we know how to play music together. We've all written albums together. We've all written records, multiple records even. I don't know. I just love it. There's like there's an organic feel to the album where it feels like it's just like it kind of just came together, but it's so good. Like I love this album. Like I rated every single song because I do that for every episode. Like I rate each song as I'm listening to the album. Everything up to Locomotive Lung, which is the instrumental track. I was like, love it, love it, love it, love it. Love all these songs, all 4 of these tracks. Locomotive Lung is neat because you don't expect an instrumental song in the middle of this kind of record. It's a good instrumental track. It's not too long. Probably the weakest song on the record to me. But then like it picks right back up with Superstars, a pretty more upbeat track. Field of Darkness is like a show stealer to me. Time Again is awesome. Believe and Hard Light are like maybe a little weaker, but they are on the back half of the record, so maybe it's just a little bit of we've been listening for 20 plus minutes at this point. But I love Still Uneasy. I love the opening track, Strong Reaction. Not What I Want. It's just everything. Yeah, I love this record. Like everything about this album just is really, really good.
Yeah, it's a record that I ultimately appreciate as one solid work rather than a collection of songs. I think it is not that it's like it's not even like it doesn't come across as a record where there was like a pretension or an idea of like a thematic record or something like that. I think it just happens to it happens to be a record that is one big painting rather than being a collection of different ideas. And it's not that it's so monotonous to do that. It has a lot of individual and unique details, but it runs together really, really well. It's just well sequenced, well paced, well done without being worked to death. Because yeah, there's a kind of precarity to it. It always feels like someone could get lost. They could lose someone.
Mm-hmm. It's a tight record. It's 27 minutes. I love that. There's even like an extra track on here that's just like one of those throwaway kind of like the Untitled at the end. It's like not even like a full song. So even then it's like not even that long. The instrumental in the middle. Yeah, it's 27 minutes. I'm like, this is great. I love a sub 30-minute record. Like it's like my favorite thing in the world. So I was looking at a couple reviews or things written about the record, and AllMusic gave the album 3 stars and said the first full-length record from Pegboy doesn't have any wildly innovative musical style, and the vocals are growled and shouted rather than sung. But if you wanted beautiful singing or musical genius, you wouldn't be listening to this band in the first place. The most surprising thing on this disc is the instrumental Locomotive Lung, which sounds almost progressive, like something Rush might have churned out at the after slamming espressos all morning. That song does have like a weird structure to it. It's like an odd, like, this is weird. This is you guys showing off a little bit. Like you're playing around with some stuff here. And I wonder if they were even like, maybe Larry was like, I can't sing over this. I'll just do this instrumental, you know? And so I found this really fun article from the Chicago Tribune in 1991. And I was like, I initially just pulled out this quote that said, "It's intense and emotional and it's rock," John Haggerty says, adding that in comparison to Naked Ray Gun, I think it's a little more to the point. There's very little thinking going on in Pegboy songs. We play what we feel, not what we think. Sometimes Naked Ray Gun thought a little too much about what we were doing. And I guess that would be like a big difference between Naked Ray Gun and Pegboy. Was the Pegboy record kind of feels like it's just happening, and the Naked Ray Gun records, especially like All Rise and Jettison, are like, oh, you crafted this. Like you put this together.
Yeah, Naked Ray Gun have more songs that sound like there's a conceit behind it. Something is theorized before it's written. It's like, I want to write a song that's like this.
Yeah.
And they do that, and they do it very well. And I don't think either approach is right or wrong. I gravitate more towards what Naked Ray Gun does in terms of, like, I want to write a song that accomplishes these goals, which is probably why I've connected more with Naked Ray Gun. But Pegboy is a more organic approach of, these are the songs we have, and we figured them all out together, and here they are, they're done. Like, this is an idea, and the rest of the ideas progressed from them.
And yeah, lyrically, I was looking at his lyrics, and I'm just like, these are just kind of like, they're songs about feelings. Like, that's how most of the songs are. I've seen people tag this as emo core. I don't think it's emo core, but if you read the lyrics, I could see where maybe you're like, oh, this is where people are saying this is emo core. I think it has enough similarities to emo core if you look at emo core as like Jawbreaker or Hot Water Music. Yeah, Jawbox a little bit too. Yeah, there's a little bit there.
Sonically, it's not in the lane, of, it's even still not that far from Embrace or Dag Nasty.
Yeah, I've seen it also called pop punk, which just reminded me of how when we were like really getting into like punk in like the late 2000s or late 2010s, we were calling everything pop punk. We were calling Off With Their Heads and Dillinger 4 and the Ergs and the Iron Sheik. We were calling everything pop punk.
Yeah.
But it was like that very specific, like Midwestern pop punk, even though they're not all from the Midwest. But
yeah, everything was pop punk. We called, if it was punk in that time period with an emphasis on melodies and hooks,
yeah,
it's pop punk. That's what it was.
Yeah, it's punk music that like is trying to achieve something like a pop song would, like a good hook and a melody. Yeah, it is funny how that term has like been like separated from just. Because I read a review it was like on Rate Your Music from 2008. They're like, this is just a great Chicago pop punk record. And I bet in 2008, if you're like, hey, you want to hear a really good Chicago pop punk record? You'd be like, yeah, give me some Lawrence Arms. Like that's the kind of thing that you would, it's got grit to it, like that kind of thing. Instead now when you say pop punk, you're like, what are you thinking? Blink-182, like, or everything after.
Yeah, the definition of pop punk is definitely correct.
So, like I said, this Chicago Tribune article is really good because it came out October 25th, 1991. And it's like, I guess it's like a format that they would do for their interviews because it literally just goes like their name, personnel, it's got all the names, formed, colon, and it gives you like where their background came from, sound, colon, and then it gives like that John Haggerty quote, influences, heritage. D'Amour's father John was center for the Bears in 1957 and 1958. So there's like some long Chicago history there. The songwriting section of that was interesting. It says, it's for the most part a collaborative effort, Haggerty says. I tend to write a guitar part first and then try to fill in a vocal part later. When Larry writes a song, he usually writes both at the same time. All songs are credited to Pegboy because that's what it means to be in a band, I think. Otherwise, you're just an artist with a bunch of backup musicians. The band wrote the song. Doesn't really matter on DIY records or like independent albums, but I guess it matters in like major label who gets points on this album type shit. And then this says on stage cover versions. I guess they're asking what covers they've played. And Haggerty says the band hasn't played any covers recently, but in the past they've performed Government Issues, Carrying Lines, The Stranglers, Bring On the Nubiles, and a few Raygun and Boful Stiff songs. And this is the memorable concert experiences. When the band first played CBGB's in New York about a year ago, so 1990, it was the last of 5 bands, and we didn't hit the stage until 2 a.m. We were sitting around CBGB's literally hours and hours waiting for these bands to finish, and Larry was drinking steadily. So by the time we got up to play for the New York crowd, which included media types and record company weasels, he was out of his mind drunk, dropping entire verses, floundering around the stage, and slurring his words. Nobody in the band talked to him for a couple days afterward. And like you kind of get that feeling while listening to the record, especially like with Larry's vocals. You're just like, keep up, Larry, keep up, Larry. You know, like I could see how he could get lost in a song very easily and lose his place. Yeah, it's a fun little article. It's just a weird like way to do it. You just give them all like a prompt, like a 1-word prompt, and then like let the band kind of fill it out themselves. Yeah, I love articles from the time period too. But there's also differences too between like something being written about in the moment versus what somehow something changes over time and is regarded over time. They're two different things. I think both looks are very important. I think the in the moment stuff has the ability to capture details that I think would otherwise be lost to time. So like you're getting like this thing happened, this specific thing happened, and they were involved with this scene, and they were literally spun out of, like there's like very hyper specific things that like make bands and albums come together that can get lost over time if it's not super well documented. And so then it turns around to being like, this was the cool thing at the time. And it's like, it wasn't the cool thing at the time,
Yeah. I would rather have in the moment documentation of stuff than 10, 15, 20 year retrospective.
Well, isn't that even like a thing in like literary or historical like writing? Isn't there something called like source history or source writing at the time? There's like a specific like academic like term or phrase when it's talking about stuff that was written while it was happening versus in retrospect.
Yeah.
That stuff carries more weight than the retrospective stuff because like narratives change over time and stories evolve and like memories are faulty and collapse together. So getting as much as you can in the moment it's why I'm so bummed that so many of the blogs from like the 2000s and 2010s are gone, because that was our in the moment stuff. Like that was like, there's this band out of, Philadelphia that everybody really likes, like locally. Like hearing people talk about Tiger's Jaw before anyone had heard the LP, the self-titled, like there's this band called Philadelphia called Tiger's Jaw, was so much more fun and valuable than it is now when you're like, yeah, Tiger's Jaw's been around for like a really long time and like most of the band's gone and it's like different people now. Like, or even Polar Bear Club, another great example of a band that was like hype in the moment. So everybody was so pumped. Everybody loved that first record. And time has like forgotten them essentially.
Yeah. Huge, like a palpable hype.
If in 2009, maybe let's say 2009, and you were to go, here's these two bands, Polar Bear Club and the Menzingers. In 2009, if you would have said, who's going to be the biggest band in 20 years?
Who's going to be remembered? Polar Bear Club.
Yeah.
Polar Bear Club is the one that's going to be remembered. And now they're probably the least essential Gaslight Anthem analog.
Yeah. So it's really fun to like have that. Like we gotta keep better documentation, which means we need to start like posting all our shit in triplicate somewhere. Oh, that blog died. Quick, let's start a new blog and repost everything just to make sure it's kept. Well, any final thoughts?
Our archive can't be Twitter.
Yeah, right.
Already impenetrable to find anything old on Twitter.
Yeah.
and it is very soon to go away.
Yeah, Tumblr's the same way. Like, it's so hard to find old stuff on Tumblr because, like, even with like Tumblr, they like change the way they like tag things. They used to use hashtags and they don't use hashtags anymore. So like you have to search both now, and sometimes it will search the content of the post but not the actual tags. They've ruined it. It's awful. Yeah. So Pegboy go on basically forever. They've never they had like a farewell show, but then they just like kept playing stuff later, and the band was like, no, we never broke up. So like, oh, okay, we were never gonna stop. Steve Sailors would leave the band in 1992 due to the inability to commit to touring. You know, he had like a job that basically was like, you can't leave for weeks at a time, and capitalism destroys creativity. So he left the band. Then Steve Albini fills in on their 4 EP, and then was eventually permanently replaced by Pierre Kesdy of Naked Raygun. So like it just became like half of Naked Raygun. But yeah, Strong Reaction to me is their best record. It stands the test of time the best, and it's just like an excellent collection of songs that became very influential on the next wave or two of punk rock. So what do you want to rate it?
For me, it's a solid 4. It's definitely something I appreciate more than I did in the past, but it's probably still not like a all-timer.
I'm going to give it a 5. To me, it is. It's an all-time classic. It's a staple of the Chicago punk scene. And yeah, the flag bearer from the Naked Raygun to the Lawrence Arms, timeline, just like carried that sound forward through time. So yeah, I love it. It's a classic for me. So that's where I'm at. Well, that will do it for this week's episode. Next week, it's time for Christmas. We haven't decided what we're going to do yet. I'm probably just going to use what else got votes on our Christmas poll on Patreon 2 Christmases ago. So I'll have to double check and see which ones those were, and then we'll do one of those. And yeah, follow us everywhere. All social media at PunkLottoPod. MajorAwards.bandcamp.com. Check out Dylan's new EP. And
we're on all streaming services, your favorites like Deezer and
Rhapsody.
Boomplay Music. YouTube, if you're weird.
Yeah.
Your favorite Turkish indie rock band. Major Awards.
All right, everyone.
Where Google got that from.
Thank you, everyone, and we will talk to you next time.
To order Punk, call the number on your screen. Rush delivery is available. Remember, this special offer is not sold in stores.